Turkey as guest of our president. I'm very happy to be hosting him here at the premises of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And we last hosted him in March at the second Antalya Diplomacy Forum. He'll be talking to the Minister of Defense after this meeting, and during the Antalya Diplomacy Forum he contributed greatly to the forum. We had the opportunity to discuss the issues on NATO's agenda. The summit in Madrid was very successful, and we followed up on the decisions of the Madrid summit. But of course, the real follow-up of the decisions will be at the meeting of NATO Ministers of Foreign Affairs in Bucharest at the end of this month, and we also delved into the preparatory stages of this summit. We exchanged opinions on NATO summit in Vilnius. There are threats on NATO's agenda. Terrorism, especially, is one of the most important threats against NATO. We also deliberated on our joint struggle against terrorism. And this year, as you know, marks the 70th anniversary of Turkey's membership to NATO. Turkey has been a responsible and leading member of NATO, and it is continuing to contribute to all efforts of NATO in the spirit of solidarity of the alliance. In the aftermath of the war in Ukraine, we will also provide additional support to the enhanced deterrence and defense posture of NATO. We also talked about the situation in Ukraine and its reflections in the region and around the world. Our principled stance vis-à-vis the situation in Ukraine is very clear. It's crystal clear. We fully support Ukraine's territorial integrity, independence, and sovereignty. And I would also like to take this opportunity to underline a few points. The grain exports problem through the Black Sea has been resolved thanks to the efforts of the president of Turkey, but it was, as you know, a 4-month deal. It needs to be uninterrupted and seamless, and under the auspices of our president will continue to do our utmost best here. The uninterrupted flow of grains is critical, and it needs to go to those who need it most. I visited 3 African countries last week and saw how afraid they are of any reduction in the grain. And we need to understand that any disruption in shipments will mean one less loaf of bread on the tables of millions of people who are already fighting hunger, and therefore we need to really do our best. And it is imperative that we work on resolving the situation in Ukraine. It's imperative to resort to diplomacy despite all challenges for clashes to end. And we've talked about all these issues with Secretary General. Turkey will continue its efforts towards these objectives. The enlargement of NATO and Sweden's and Finland's accession bids were also on our agenda. As you know, in Madrid, we undersigned a trilateral memorandum, and the Secretary General was very influential, was a key figure in making it possible, and authorities of both countries are now underlining their commitment to the memorandum. But what matters most, of course, is the concrete fulfillment of the issues covered in the memorandum. The new government, because we knew the outgoing government could not do much, but the new government is determined, and the new Prime Minister of Sweden will visit our country next week. He will have the chance to meet him and to talk about these issues. There's also a trilateral experts mechanism, and the first meeting took place in Helsinki. The next meeting will take place in Stockholm, and these meetings, expert-level meetings, will also allow us to look at the steps forward. With these thoughts, I'd like to welcome my friend Jens and leave the floor to him. Jens, welcome.
Minister Çavuşoğlu, dear Mevlüt, thank you so much for your warm welcome. It's always a pleasure to be back here in Istanbul and to meet with you. Turkey is a highly valued NATO ally, making important contributions to our shared security. You play a major role in the fight against terrorism, including in our mission in Iraq. You are also contributing to our maritime and air policing deployments and contributing to our collective defense in many other ways. NATO also contributes to the security of Turkey by augmenting your air defenses and through our air and naval presence in the Eastern Mediterranean and the Black Sea. Our unity and solidarity are essential as we face the greatest security crisis in a generation. Today, we discussed a number of issues, including the situation in the Aegean, our fight against terrorism, Finland and Sweden's accession to NATO, and our support for Ukraine. President Putin is failing in Ukraine, but he is responding with more brutality. In recent weeks, we have seen dozens of drone and missile strikes across Ukraine, including on critical infrastructure, cruelly and deliberately depriving Ukrainian civilians of heating, water and electricity at the outset of winter. We also see Iran offering drones and considering ballistic missile deliveries to Russia. This is unacceptable. No country should provide support to Moscow in this illegal war. I want to thank Turkey for all its support to Ukraine. The cutting-edge drones and ships built here in Turkey are helping to uphold Ukraine's right to self-defense. I also commend Turkey and President Erdogan personally for negotiating safe passage for Ukrainian grain through the Black Sea, easing the global food crisis. I welcome the continuation of the UN grain agreement and Turkey's efforts to maintain this lifeline on which hundreds of millions of people around the world depend. Today, we also discussed the ratification of Finland and Sweden's NATO membership. At the Madrid summit in June, all allies made an historic decision to invite Finland and Sweden to join NATO. And all allies signed the accession protocols. Turkey, Finland and Sweden also agreed a trilateral memorandum. As you said, Mevlüt, you have significant expectations that this memorandum will deliver more security for Turkey. I recognize your concerns. At the same time, it is clear that Finland and Sweden have delivered on the memorandum and are committed to the long-term partnership with Turkey. This week, I have spoken to the leadership of both Finland and Sweden, and I welcome the major, concrete actions taken by both countries to put the memorandum into practice. Finland and Sweden have significantly increased cooperation with Turkey to counter terrorism, and a permanent joint mechanism has been established. Sweden is passing new legislation prohibiting participation in terrorist organizations, including the PKK, and strengthening the tools on terrorist financing. More extraditions and expulsions are taking place, and restrictions on arms sales to Turkey have ended. Finland and Sweden have delivered on their agreement with Turkey. They have become strong partners in our joint fight against terrorism in all its forms and manifestations. And they are clearly committed to a long-term engagement with Turkey to address your security concerns. So it's time to welcome Finland and Sweden as full members of NATO. Their accession will make our alliance stronger and our people safer. In these dangerous times, it is even more important to finalize their accession, to prevent any misunderstanding or miscalculation in Moscow, and to send a clear message to Russia that NATO's door remains open. And it's only for allies and aspirant countries to decide on NATO membership, nobody else. So I look forward to welcoming both countries as full NATO members in the near future. Dear Mevlut, thank you again for Turkey's strong commitment to our alliance. I look forward to continuing to work with you and to the rest of my visit to Turkey. Thank you.
Thank you. Any question?
This is CNN Turk, Mücahit Topçu, and my question is to both the Minister and Secretary General. The grain deal, Putin first said he was opting out, and there was a short-term crisis which was resolved. Yesterday, the president of Turkey said the issue was resolved and the grain shipments were in the pipeline. Now, can you tell us what you've talked about during your discussions about this grain deal? Turkey is doing a good negotiation between leaders. Do you think Turkey could also bring the parties to a ceasefire agreement? What are your thoughts?
Çok teşekkür ederim sorularınız için.
Thank you for these questions. The grain deal, when it was signed, led to a reduction in grain prices. In fact, it was the most important reduction. It was around 9% in recent history. But when Russia said it suspended the grain deal, the cooperation, grain prices went up by 4-5%, and that was a very rapid response, clearly creating concerns. And our president talked to President Putin by phone, and President Putin was constructive, approached the issue constructively. Our president also talked to President Zelensky, our Minister of Defense, talked to his counterparts, Russian and Ukrainian counterparts, also talked to the Minister of Infrastructure of the Ukraine, which is the counterpart when it comes to the grain deal, and both parties were very constructive, and through President Putin's decision, President Putin came back to the grain deal, as our president also announced. Now, this deal needs to be extended. I talked to Mr. Lavrov, I talked to Mr. Blinken in the US, I talked to the Secretary General of the UN. You've probably followed these. It's very important that commitments made to Russia on grain and fertilizer shipments be kept. All our phone talks as well as correspondence show this very clearly. These concerns need to be eliminated. This doesn't mean supporting Russia. It's a deal, and for the deal to exist, the deal needs to be upheld. And we always say the grain and fertilizer of Russia are needed by everyone and mostly by the least developed countries. I went to Africa, as I said, and any hindrance on fertilizer exports will drastically cut agricultural production by 20%. So under the leadership of our president, we'll continue to put our best effort to maintain the deal. Now, you also asked about the war. The war is ongoing, unfortunately, and it's becoming more complicated as it becomes more prolonged. On the 29th of March, when both parties came together in Istanbul, the situation out in the field, the foreign policies, when it came to Crimea, Donbass, the situation was very different. Things have become more complicated. The more prolonged the war is, the more complicated it will become. So we need diplomacy. It is imperative that we make diplomacy work not only for Ukraine and Russia, but for the world. The territories that are attacked are Ukrainian territories. We need a fair peace. We need a fair resolution that supports and upholds Ukraine's territorial integrity. Thank you.
First of all, I expressed my gratitude to Turkey, to President Erdogan and to Foreign Minister Çavuşoğlu and to the government of Turkey for their efforts and the important work they have done to enable and to make the grain deal possible. Because we need to understand that hundreds of millions of people around the world totally depend on grain and food exported from Ukraine over the Black Sea to the Bosporus to the world market. And if this food is not exported, if it's not reaching the global market, then prices will go up and millions of people will suffer. So the grain deal is extremely important for food prices and for feeding hundreds of millions of people around the world. And therefore, I commend Turkey for what they have done. I also commend Turkey, the President, the Foreign Minister, for the latest efforts to ensure that after the suspension we saw over the weekend, the grain deal is functioning and enforced again. And I also agree with Foreign Minister Çavuşoğlu that it is important that the grain deal is renewed and extended, because this has to continue. And this demonstrates the important role that Turkey has played in the conflict in Ukraine, not only by supporting Ukraine with essential equipment, with drones, with ships, with other humanitarian and military support, but also in facilitating diplomatic efforts, supporting and enabling the grain deal. Also, of course, the United Nations and others have participated and been part of this. But also the exchange of prisoners and other diplomatic efforts, which I think are extremely important in trying to at least reduce some of the effects of the brutal war which is going on in Ukraine. But let me just end with the following, and that is that the increased prices and the problems we have seen in the global food market is not caused by sanctions. It is caused by the war itself. So the best way of ending this is for President Putin to end the war. It is the war or aggression that is undermining and threatening the supplies of food from Ukraine to the world market. The grain deal helps to reduce the effects, but the lasting solution will be to end the war, and that's Russia's responsibility to end this war of aggression against Ukraine.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm Hanne Christiansen from Norwegian Aftenposten. Mr. Foreign Minister, the Secretary General was very clear that Sweden and Finland have now lived up to the commitments in the agreement. Can you confirm whether when Turkey will be ratifying the applications and whether this will happen before the Turkish elections in 2023?
Çok teşekkür ediyorum.
Thank you.
Açılış konuşmamda
In my opening
anlatmaya
remarks, I actually touched
Madrid'de
upon
Genel
this.
Sekreterin de katkılarıyla
In Madrid, also with the help of the Secretary General, we undersigned a memorandum. And if you look at the
sadece
memorandum,
davet edilmesi için imzalamadık bunu.
we just didn't sign it for
Bu iki ülkenin
inviting these countries to NATO. We undersigned the memorandum to make it very clear all the steps that are needed for accession. And some steps have indeed been fulfilled. As Secretary General said, the arms embargo of Sweden was lifted. This is an important step, and some companies were actually also received positively. They are amending the laws in Sweden, but not all components, not all points in the memorandum are completely implemented by these countries. We are very clear that there are positive steps, and the Secretary General is clear too. We are not there to hamper NATO. We're not there to hamper NATO's enlargement. Secretary General knows very well that Turkey has been one of the most steadfast supporters of NATO's enlargement in all summits. We've been very clear about NATO enlargement and our support for it. So we would like to see these two countries take concrete steps against terrorism, because one of the top priorities of NATO is the fight against terrorism, and Madrid was very clear in its conclusions and would like to see concrete steps. The announcements by the new government have been received very positively by us, and we've talked to Prime Minister Christopherson, and when he mentioned that he would like to visit, we took the necessary steps immediately and started preparing for it. In fact, the Prime Minister will be in Turkey on the 8th of November. That is Tuesday. And the fact that the mechanism will meet again in Stockholm is also an important step. So the positive steps that have been taken, as well as the steps that remain, will be deliberated in all these mechanisms. It's not enough to lift an arms embargo. It's important that once these countries accede, no steps back are taken. The ratification will take place in the parliament. And it's important that we show the Turkish people that concrete steps have been taken. The timeline, the calendar is up to the two countries and the steps that they will take. We're very constructive in our stance, but we're also very clear and very open about our concerns. And in fact, the memorandum covers those aspects. We need to see its implementation, and we have an upcoming calendar and series of meetings to deliberate on these. But let me also say that we don't, relatively speaking, we don't have that much of a problem with Finland's stance. And we know that these two countries want to join together. They have said this clearly to NATO. NATO places importance on their joint accession, so we would like to see it too. We expect the new government of Sweden to take steps, even more concrete steps. We're happy with the steps they've taken already, but would like to see their final steps within the scope of the memorandum.
Okay. Please, sorry. First of all, I welcome strongly the decision taken in June by all allies, also Turkey. Second, what we have seen is that Finland and Sweden are implementing on legislation on stepping up cooperation with Turkey on fighting terrorism, and also removing restrictions on arms exports to Turkey. I have spoken over the last few days with President Niinistö of Finland, Prime Minister Kristersson of Sweden, but also Prime Minister Sanna Marin of Finland, and they all conveyed the same message, that this is important for them. They are living up to the joint memorandum, and they also see the value in actually working closer together with Turkey to fight terrorism, because that's also in their own interests. And we see that legislation has been changed. We see that, for instance, Sweden is now banning, or in the process of banning, membership in terrorist organizations, and that will also affect, of course, the numbers of people that can be extradited from Sweden. So Finland and Sweden have delivered. I think the time has come to invite them, or to make them, not only they are all invited, but to make them full members of the alliance. And therefore, this was an issue we discussed today. I expect that also to be an issue to be raised with President Erdogan tomorrow. But more importantly, the Swedish Prime Minister will be here in a few days. And of course, that will be one of the main issues I expect them to address. So I think the time has come to then make sure that Finland and Sweden are full members in the near future. Okay, thank you.
Radio Swiss Jazz, Swiss made by SRG SSR.
I don't need a woman to keep me warm at night. I can just sleep closer to the fire. And I don't want a woman who wants to make me blue. I want a woman just like you. There's something about that woman keep me up all night, talking to myself and howling at the moon. There's something about that woman makes me crazy as a loon. I want a woman just like you, you. La 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 la. La 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 la. La 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 la. La la la. I want a woman just like you. Cowboy boots and cut-off jeans and a Mona Lisa smile. Delicious imperfection adds the spice. I don't need another woman gonna play me for a fool. I need a woman just like you. La 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 la. La 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 la. La 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 la. La 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 la. I want a woman just like you. I want a woman just like you. I need a woman, baby, how about you?
just to love and be loved in return. They say he wandered very far, far over land and sea. A little bit shy and so sad a lot, but very wise was he. And then one day, a magic day, he passed my way. And while we spoke of many things, fools and kings, this he said to me: the greatest thing you ever learn is just to love and be loved in return.
Radio Suisse Jazz, Swiss made by SRG SSR.